unless Congress passes a law that explicitly gives him that authority, which this particular act did not. It's vague on the question of tariffs and what counts as an emergency. Then no, that power has to remain with Congress, and so that's a very plausible way that the Supreme Court could end up ruling on this case.
First, to the United States, where a U.S. court has reinstated Donald Trump's tariffs, overturning a ruling last night which would have put a block on the levies. Markets have been flat in the wake of the uncertainty created by the decision. A White House advisor said the Trump administration is ready to take its appeal to the Supreme Court. So the question now is, what can we expect from both the markets and the White House in the coming days, and indeed the judges? Let's speak to Ernie Tedeschi, Director of Economics at the Budget Lab at Yale University. Now there's a title, Ernie, and a former chief economist at the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Ernie, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, people are describing this as another twist in the tariff saga. What do you read into this move by a federal appeals court to reinstate his tariffs plan? What do you think's happening?
The original decision that overrode the tariffs is the biggest hit to Trump's trade policy so far this year. Obviously, today a court reinstated it temporarily while the case is on appeal, but I think that there is. I think that those IEEPA tariffs, the tariffs that were based on, the law giving the president emergency powers, are under real threat. And there is a meaningful chance that the Supreme Court in the end could uphold the ruling overturning them and permanently overturn them. Now, that doesn't end the trade war. The president has other trade authority that he can try to draw on. There is temporary 5-month authority that allows him to place tariffs of up to 15% on most countries that they would last for 5 months, and then he would have to go to Congress to get approval. There are other commodity-based authorities, sort of similar to the steel, aluminum, and auto authority that he's already used, that was not invalidated by the court. He could expand that. So I think at the end of the day, what this really does is just heighten the uncertainty about where tariff policy ends up being. It was already so high, and now it's even more uncertain.
I see, Ernie, that the White House advisor, Peter Navarro, says the Trump administration will take its appeal to the Supreme Court if they need to. But he added this, and this is quite heavy: even if we lose, we will do it another way. You've outlined a couple of the ways that they plan to do it. But why would they want to, given that it doesn't seem to be working?
They are convinced that tariffs are the solution to the trade deficit that the United States has with most countries, which is now the interesting part of that theory is that we obviously came to a trade deal with the UK. The United States currently has a trade surplus with the UK, and yet the White House insisted on maintaining the 10% universal tariff at the time with the UK. That 10% universal tariff is exactly what is under question in these court cases. And it was actually the commodity tariffs, the tariffs on steel and aluminum and autos, the ones that were not invalidated by the court, that the White House was willing to negotiate on with the UK and lowered in those cases. So they are convinced that their true policy has not yet been tried. Tariffs were still ramping up at the time of this court hearing yesterday. And they think it will work in the long term, even though they've acknowledged there has been pain and there will be pain in the short run.
But what about the constitutional tug of war, Ernie? I see that the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has said, we will win this battle in court, and said that the administration is working to, and I quote, tackle rogue judges. How rogue was the decision of the initial court? I mean, how rogue was it? On what basis did they err in law?
So I know a lot of conservatives in Washington, D.C., and a lot of them will tell you that the issue at play here and the way that the original trade court ruled in overturning these tariffs made a lot of sense and is a plausible basis for the Supreme Court, which, as many of you know, is stacked with conservative judges right now. That it's a plausible basis for the Supreme Court to overturn it. The issue is that the argument against these tariffs is that, number one, the administration has not outlined an emergency that fits the description of the law that they're using to give them authority to unilaterally enact these tariffs. And that number two, they are raising trillions of dollars in revenue. And the US Constitution is very explicit that revenue raising authority sits with the House of Representatives, not even Congress in general. All tax bills have to start with the House. Now, Congress obviously passed the emergency economic law that gives the president this authority, but the Supreme Court has been arguing lately in different cases that when it's a legal doctrine called the major questions doctrine, the idea that for such a major question of things like can the president just unilaterally raise trillions of dollars in revenue, something that is normally a power reserved to Congress? And the answer is that unless Congress passes a law that explicitly gives him that authority, which this particular act did not, it's vague on the question of tariffs and what counts as an emergency, then no, that power has to remain with Congress. And so that's a very plausible way that the Supreme Court could end up ruling on this case.
Mm-hmm. And Ernie, the president boasted recently that something like 200 different entities, countries mainly, are lining up to sign trade deals with him. So far, I can only count Britain that's actually done this, got over the line. And that he also said loads of jobs were going to come back. Manufacturing was going to come back to the US. I mean, where's the evidence of that? Is it working?
So there is no evidence. There is zero evidence of that so far. Now, to be fair, it's still relatively early in the lifetime of these tariffs. They were just introduced, and even after they were introduced, they weren't really biting for a lot of the time after they were introduced. But I will say that at the Budget Lab, we do economic projections of these tariffs using global trade models that are standard issue among trade economists. And what they find is that it's a mixed story. So as of 48 hours ago, before these reciprocal tariffs were overturned, I would have told you that there is a real trade-off for the U.S. economy, that manufacturing, employment, and output does rise in the long run as a result of the tariffs that were in place 48 hours ago. But that is more than made up for in declines in other sectors of the U.S. economy, like construction, like farming, agriculture, like mining. So that net, when you add up all the pluses and minuses, the United States economy was still about 0.4% smaller in the long run as a result of those tariffs. That's the equivalent of about $100 billion in 2024 dollars each year, every year as a result of it. So, manufacturing might have benefited, but there were other sectors that were hurt more.
Ernie, thank you very much indeed for landing there. Ernie Tedeschi, Director of Economics at the Budget Lab at Yale University, former Chief Economist at the White House Council of Economic Advisors. He was in post until just last year for President Biden.